Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 44th Annual Old Dominion University Literary Festival here at ODU Virginia Beach. This is apparently the martini day of the festival, and I'm just pleased to welcome you here in the room at ODU Virginia Beach and everyone out in the live stream world. Welcome to this event. We are so pleased to be featuring Lisa Beach Hartz today, and before we get to her, I'd like to say thank you to our festival directors, especially Professor Catherine Jackson here in Virginia Beach. Thank you to the Virginia Beach team who has helped to put this event together. Thank you to the University Bookstore that has Lisa's book, The Goldfish Window, here on sale for you to purchase. It makes a wonderful gift. And we are so delighted to have one of our MFA graduate students, Katie Van Door, who, as you may know, is the writing tutor here in ODU Virginia Beach. If any of you need writing assistance for your courses, you can find Katie downstairs in the Beach Learning Commons. And she is here to introduce our distinguished guest. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Katie Van Door.
Hi, everybody. A Hampton Roads local, Lisa Beach Hartz directs Seven Cities Writers Project, which brings cost-free creative writing workshops to underserved communities. She is a founder of the Muse Writing Center and guides workshops in the Norfolk City Jail, the LGBT Life Center in Norfolk, and the Color Community Library Museum in Portsmouth. Her ekphrastic collection, The Goldfish Window, was published by Graydon Books in 2018. Her stunning imagery and lyric voice characterize the art-inspired poems therein have had critics praise The Goldfish Window as an unforgettable collection. As well, her works have appeared or are forthcoming in journals including the Massachusetts Review, Shenandoah, the Gettysburg Review, the Adroit Journal, Read a Biter, and Beloit Poetry Journal. So please welcome Lisa Beach Hartz.
Thanks very much, Katie. I'm going to get the visuals started because this presentation is all about the visual. The entire collection is poems about the lives and work of visual artists. And I thought I could give you a reading. We could spend 45 minutes and you reading my work too, and then we could do a Q&A. Or I could take you along with me through the process of writing ekphrastic poetry. So ekphrastic poetry is the writing, well, it's actually a conversation between art forms. It's one form responding to another. In my case, I write poetry in response to visual art. The first thing that I do, and I spent about 3-4 years doing this, going to art museums, opening up art books, going online where there is an endless treasure trove of visual images, picking something that caught my eye and writing about it. This is one of those images. It's a still life, and you'll see lots of these in museums and art galleries. They are, after all, easy to put together. It's a model that's not going to get tired and need a break. And they, on the surface, look like just things on a table if you don't take a little time. So the first thing that I do when I pick an image that's interesting to me is really stop and look at it, right? Take the time to look at all the corners of the frame. What are the objects chosen by the artist to be here? Why are they arranged in the way that they are? And then maybe I look into the artist, in this case himself, where he was in his career, what might have been motivating him to choose to do this still life at this time. Perhaps he did a series. Where does this one fall in the series, etc. Now this one, then I think about what in particular interested me about this still life. And what caught my eye from the very beginning was this orange. There is something so sexy about this orange. And having an orange in 1866 in France was maybe not an everyday thing. So let me read to you the poem in response to this. Okay. Still life, Henri Fontaine-Latour, 1866. Consider the tender flesh of the orange, this orange, the one he split open to please you, releasing its lush, percussive scent, remember what came before the threaded membrane burst, when to imagine tasting the ruptured interior of an orange in midwinter was its own seduction. Even the flowers, even the teacup, the closed book, all else still, complicit in this unlacing. Okay, so the next image I have for you. Okay, and that poem addressed the viewer, right? I'm talking intensely to myself about what I was interested in, what this painting was maybe trying to tell me. With the next image. Okay, so this is a photograph from 1902 by someone named Clarence H. White. He was a very influential teacher at Columbia Teachers College in New York City. He taught some of our most famous photographers. I became fascinated by this man because he was not only a wonderful teacher, but he really loved his wife and kids. He was an incredibly kind person. And what he said to his students over and over again was, look, look, keep looking. And he also was a very limited resources. Before he was a teacher, he worked as a bookkeeper in, I believe it was a hardware store in the Midwest. And he's using glass plate negatives, which are very expensive. And so when he went out to shoot, he engaged his wife and her sisters. They were reliable models. And he had to think he spent the week thinking about what the picture was going to be. And then, once he gathers his models, of course, he has to arrange them in such a way and then wait for that moment. Glass plate negative, people have to hold very still while it's exposed. So this is a whole process. This is nothing like what we have in our pockets. Okay. And in this case, because I just fell in love with this man, I mean, no one said a bad word about him. And often artists are portrayed as just, especially male artists, as just selfish, horrible spouses, bad parents. This guy was exemplary. And so I wanted to talk directly to him. I felt I'd read so much about him, I felt like I knew him. So this directly addresses Clarence H. White, The Orchard, 1902. You have learned to wait and not to wait, to arrive in silence, to listen for the image as much as to see it. It will appear to you in the scent of the early apples in the orchard, in the shushing of the three skirts across the grass. This morning, you can't locate the picture. No matter how your eyes scan the frame, then the sensation of helplessness, of the severing of access to a kind of God. The one who whispers in the dark room as the shadows emerge. The tree blackened with damp, your wife's velvet jacket, how one leaf grows white among the fallen fruit, and one appears to be an absolute absence of light. You wait and watch, heart shrilling, hand on the lens cap, listen for the birds, name them, starling, waxwing, swallow. Somehow, when you reach that precise moment, their twitter and lash will burn themselves into the glass. The women's hum and chatter, the water scent filling the shade. Then the sunlight beyond, how it dazzles the grass, how it invites the open sea. Middle ground, her two sisters in their dark dresses, turning like the workings of a clock, offering poses and poses. Have patience. Soon enough they will forget. Meanwhile, the spangled ground, crushed and tender leaves. Meanwhile, the anticipated moment of release. Your wife and everything contained in her turns in her white skirt, reaches down for the waiting apple. You hardly know you've done it till it's done. Light floods the lens. Thank you. I just love this man so much. I wish he would come to me in dreams. You know, you read enough about somebody, they're supposed to come to you in dreams. He never has. Okay, one of his students was a woman named Doris Ulmann, who I was so obsessed with. I wrote a whole book of poems about her. This is a woman from the Upper West Side of New York City, very wealthy. Could have stayed home, had tea parties, done fundraisers. Instead, she got in her very expensive car with her chauffeur, dressed in a fancy, expensive dress, enormous hat, and drove into places like Appalachia and recorded the most dignified photographs of the people who lived there. And then she had a friend, Julia Peterkin, who interestingly was a Pulitzer Prize winner, a white lady who wrote books about Black people who lived on the plantation strand in such a way. She was a white person who wrote about Black people in the way that white people want to read. So these books do not hold up. She sort of rode the line, Julia Peterkin. But this little girl is a girl who lived on that plantation. She's a little girl. And I just became fascinated by how Doris Ulmann gets out of her car, puts up her tripod bigger than this that people are seeing me on Facebook on, great big wooden box camera, which she chose. By now, it's 1933. She could have had you seen one of these little cameras that you look down at and you carry it around with you. No, she chose to use the big box camera and the glass plate negative. She takes a really long time to set up and all that. And meanwhile, she's got to get this child, who she's fallen in love with, as you must when you see her, to pose for her. And so I needed to imagine what that was like, and I was nervy enough. I hope it works for you. To write this in Doris Ullmann's perspective, because I really am fascinated by that process, and I wanted to see how she would get this girl posed. So what you need to know is that Lang Syne is the name of the plantation. Again, Julia Peterkin is the mistress of the plantation, and I think that's all I need to know. The Heaven's Gate is the church on the plantation where the people do it. A girl with a bow. At Lang Syne, that flat mound, Julia introduces her Negroes as the people who came with the acres, like fruit trees or pests, like the Spanish moss that seems to exist on a diet of air. They have the blackest black eyes that keep everything in sight. I feel weightless, a shimmer. Julia's red hair stands out from her head like a terrible crown. You can see she's torn about them and not torn. Chin up, eyes down. I say, I'd like to take your picture. Why take? Blink, blink, say the children. A cicada filled silence. The mother on the porch rocking, same torch her mother rocked. Her grandmother, same spot Sunday her spindly daughter. Outside, the Heaven's Gate leaning, little dark brown girl. Hair bold like magnolia blossom. Outsides, waxen, glowing. Indigo skirt, sky blue ruffled dress. Iridescent buttons, silver earrings. She see my big camera inside the church and me, the odd sparrow woman standing next to it, watching as they drop their knees and heave flood come creeping for our door. She looks straight through me and beyond into the palmetto scrub swim. I say, you're blooming. How close will she let you get? She holds something burnished inside herself, a stone. Are you a little flower? Shimmer of a smile in her eyes. When I was a girl, I say, I liked to imagine I was a rose. I swing my white skirt, petals freezing. I won't ask you to smile, I say. Little stone inside her shakes. You just be there, I say, and I'll be here. The care her mother has taken, the hands that tied the bow, stitched on those oyster buttons. She studies the other children who gather and scatter, skittish, half curious. They play shadow tag. They play crack the whip. It begins in different ways. So the first time it's talking about the relationship with that the viewer has with the painting, right? The second time it was actually speaking directly to the artist. And with the girl with bow, that was me, a persona poem, right? I'm pretending to be Doris Ulmann and imagining what that experience was like to make that photograph. Okay, so, and this next one, all right. Oh, wish everyone had been there. This was an exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum in New York City Paul Cezanne drew and painted his wife hundreds of times. And this exhibition was like hundreds of images. It was incredible. They were not a happy couple. She was very patient. He was a very slow producer of art. But you see her face over picture after picture after picture doesn't change. She's the steady, and he's not so steady. So what you need to know for this one, this is just me talking about the experience of going to this exhibition and this piece. And you might need to know, if you don't, that the Metropolitan Museum of Art is on the edge of Central Park, and that MoMA is the acronym for the Museum of Modern Art, which I tried to go to after this, and it was just too much. So again, so this is just me. Madame Cezanne exhibition, Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York City, January 2015. She's with me all day after that, in the park, watching the puffy coats like bright poppies slipping down the snowy embankments on their little discs. She shadows me down the shiny avenues and ice streets and even into MoMA, where I could hear her skirt swishing through the galleries, her voice smoky when she used it, which wasn't often. She has very small things to say, such a read, too many lines. They say he spent long minutes between brush strokes contemplating each one, the halting greens and blues, and the drawings too, a million tiny lines. How long she must have held the pose, regardless of the sudden noise from the street, the buzzing fly. How wise her eyes and all the permutations in them. In the evenings, when his brain had sunk to glowing ash, she read to him, sometimes, yes, until the candle drowned. All right, so that's all the time you have to listen to me. And now, it's your turn. Okay, so this object may look familiar to you. Anybody? Yeah, you walk past it every day when you come to this building. And Renee Olander was kind enough to suggest that we use something as familiar as this to remind you, of course, that art is everywhere, but also that too often we walk past it and we don't really look. So the first thing we do in the process of creating ekphrastic poetry is look. Really look. All right, so we're not writing now. We're looking. Okay, we're counting the number of faces. And we're thinking about the shapes of the different faces. The fact that this is all polished and this is not. The different colors, the uniformity of color in the faces, this is different from the shapes, how they're arranged. Okay, now we've gone around to the right side of the piece, and you can see better here how, and you'll have your own words to describe what that looks like. And that, again, the faces are conveying. And this is the back of the piece. And one side is semi-polished. I don't know stone sculpture very well, and one side is left rough. And then we're back around now to the, looking at it, the left side, and back around again to the front. Okay, so in a normal situation, you'd have picked your own artwork. You'd have picked something that interested you. So this is artificial to begin with, but we're going to do it anyway as an exercise. Now you're going to take up your pens and your paper, and we're going to walk back around. And you're going to take your time describing exactly what you see. You're not being pretty here. This is not poetry yet. This is just, I'm looking so carefully, writing everything I can write down here. I like to think of it as I'm describing it for someone who can't see it. That's how detailed, right? Okay, so you're going to take like 5 minutes and write everything you can think of. I mean, think about the sheen, the way the light hits faces that seem uniform are not, in fact, if you look closely. Take some minutes. One more minute, so I just want to get as much information on the page. So, can never come back here. You go home and still write about this encounter. Okay. Okay, this is where it's easier if you've chosen the piece yourself because it sparks something in you, maybe you stop and look. But I have chosen it for you. What is your emotional response to this piece? What in your life, perhaps, your history, your family history, your community history, resonates with this piece? Anything that comes into your head. the longer you look, of course, the more you're going to feel. None of what you're writing now has to be pretty or sound like poetry, right? This is why rough drafts are called rough drafts. Take like 4 minutes, deep dive. Next step, if you're so inclined, and I clearly was, on my reading, consider the artist. What is the history of this artist? What is their creative process? This is interesting, actually. I went home having taken a good long look at this piece, and I took with me only this much information. And you can't find out a whole lot about this man online. You can find that he's from Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is a very young independent nation, 67, 3 or 4 years old. And that there is a tradition in Zimbabwe of something called Shona sculpture. And the material is Opal Stone. Other than that, I couldn't find anything on the internet, which I thought was actually a good lesson learned, that we don't want to make a lot of assumptions about cultures with whom we're not familiar, right? But then I arrived here today and I noticed I had missed something. A super helpful plaque on, I'm going to read it, on the piece. Since its advent in 1956, Zimbabwean stone sculpture, practiced chiefly by the people of the Shona tribe, has made a major contribution in contemporary art. An art form, sorry, this is really small. An art form that has journeyed through Zimbabwean national. Okay, here we go. The second generation Zimbabwean stone sculptor, Dereck Macheka, learned his craft under the guidance of his famous uncle. Viewers, it invites viewers to consider epistemology, the contributions of all humans to our common heritage, and the ways in which knowledge is shared and passed down among us. Well, that's a note by someone just like you, right? Who's making comments about what they see. But in any case, that's all we can know about the artist in this case. But I'd like you to take some minutes and think about maybe what his intention was, contemplate what he was intending you to feel, what he was hoping that you would think, what some of the context was for him, what his process might have been. Oh, and you might want to consider the name of the piece is the Book of Knowledge. What was he trying to make you feel? Oh, and also, in an effort to not make assumptions, I think it's always welcome to include your questions. Probably have more questions for this man and about his background, and you have knowledge of it. So I wouldn't be afraid to include those as well. It's like two minutes without. Weave these elements together. What does that mean? You go back to your visual description, and now that you've had some time to think about your emotional response, there'll be things in that physical description that fit with your emotional response, right? If you spent some time on one face, or the expressions on the faces, or you got really interested in the colors, focus on those, and then you're going to weave together your feelings with the visual, with maybe your speculation about who the artist was. And you could consider at this point, of course, your point of view. You could write about, from the point of view of just yourself experiencing this work. You could consider the artist and what his process might have been. You could directly address the artist, right? You have all kinds of options here. So take, say, where are we? Take 7 minutes, which is ridiculous, and create a first draft of the poem, weaving together these elements. Okay. It's like the most unnatural way in the world to create art, but it's a good exercise. Okay, you knew this was coming. Anybody brave enough to share if they come up with? Keeping in mind, we know this is the roughest of rough drafts. This is the absolute beginning. Anybody?
I'll give it a whirl.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right, just read.
Yes. Would you like to be seen by
Sure.
the world? That's fine.
All right, my name's Elijah Webb. These are my thoughts on the piece. An eerie green light and shadow both pervade the abandoned colony, carved out from the bedrock of their last resting place and presented, they remain at peace. Was this peace in slumber, meditation, or death? It is unknown, just like the place of their origin. Were they explorers? Or did they arrive here by accident, lost at sea, lost in the forest, or in space? They share features, emotion, excitement, trials and tribulations, life and death as one being. They cling together to make sense of this world alien, but together and unified, they are the herd, safe and protected, so long as they remain as one people, one voice. Thank you for listening.
Wow, magic happened. I'm sorry, what is your name?
Elijah.
Elijah, thank you so much. That was remarkable. That's worth taking another look at. That's taking that up to look, send it up to look. It was really beautiful. Thank you. Anybody else as brave as Elijah? Set a high bar.
Yeah. Bold.
Anybody? Anybody? Yes, Katie. Great.
I didn't really write a poem, but
Who knows what a poem is? Only the poet knows.
I have traveled far to obtain the book of knowledge, sacrificed much to grip it now in my hands. Hewn of stone and blood, I know not what to expect upon my opening, cannot predict or barely perceive the eruption of silent ancient faces, if they can even be called that, with their cacophony of songs, lost knowledge in verse, dim light shining off their polished verdigris, burnished rock flesh, the outer edges and tips blossom red gold as if rubbed smooth by a million hands. I was not prepared for their maddening dispensations, their unchecked outpouring of information, both sought and not, as if a dam unbroken for 1,000 years, suddenly bidden forth. I feel adrift, unable to isolate a single trickle in the vast current. I bid them stop, but the wash of knowledge stops for no man.
Wow. Thank you so much. That was incredible. Wow. Talent in the room. I'm very pleased. Anybody else? Okay. You think you'll return to this? You live in an incredible place with many, many cultural venues, one of which is right on your campus at ODU, the Berry, which is just an incredible gem, as well as, of course, the Grand Old Lady, the Chrysler, and Mocha out here in Virginia Beach, and a myriad of other places, the Hermitage, I'm going to forget a whole bunch of places, private galleries. Go to them. There are little stools at the Chrysler you can borrow that you can sit on and spend all the time you want staring at a piece of art. I highly recommend it. To me, it's as healthy an exercise as taking a walk in the woods. All right, well, thank you. I'm going to close with the title poem from the collection. This is a painting by American painter Childe Hassam from 1916. In the yellow morning, she combs her fingers through the knots the night's rocking has left in her hair. A dozen strands form an amber cloud. She steps to the open window and offers it to the breeze, which spirits it away. Nesting season, perhaps she'll see those strands again. Water murmurs in the bowl, light ripple and gold flash. An unseen bird flirts from the shadowed camellia. Bruised petals, pine straw. The nest, the one the birdsong is conjuring, an open cup of surrendered woven things. Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions for me about this process? I hope it's something you really will take away with you. It's a great gift.
What made you interested in expressive poetry in the first place?
Actually, I was at the Muse, and we were invited out of nowhere to write in response to photographs at the Mariners Museum. And I fell in love with a picture called Gulliver Fisherman, 1933, by Doris Ulmann, took the girl with bow. That's how I discovered that this is a lady who stood in her silk stockings in the water to take a picture of these men with their net, with Gulliver Fisherman. I just was fascinated by her, and I went down the rabbit hole. And then it just became this. I mean, I've always been very envious of visual artists to get what you see. And have people actually see it. You know, writers, you can describe it, but they can and it comes with the best artists, right, with all the feeling that they had when they made the thing. So, but it was a wonderful invitation, and the Mariners did a reading, and they put up the images, and it was life altering. Say yes to invitations like that, especially if they scared the bejesus out of you, because it was really life altering. Anybody else? Catherine.
I just thought I'd share a few comments from some of our streamers.
Oh.
Via the magic of technology that Benny and others have set up for us. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Oh.
They say, Abby says, great exercise. Someone else says, a lovely poem about the goldfish window that you read, ending on opening a window to the world. Megan says, thank you. Is that me for this process? Regarding your sculpture, a profound sculpture, I can't mute this, sorry. Really cool, awesome.
Well, thanks, Catherine. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd just like to encourage you if you are here in the room, take time to appreciate the art that is here in the building, including the Book of Knowledge and other art downstairs and around the building. And also partake of the luncheon we have. Please buy copies of the Goldfish Window for all of your friends and family. And thanks to the ODU bookstore, which has it also on the main campus. If you are live streaming, you can get Lisa Beach Hartz's work on the main campus at the bookstore or online. And if you would all give yourselves a round of applause for participating in this. And I meant to say before we began that, as we know, empathy, which we need to get through this pandemic, and empathy, which we need to be part of our collective humanity that the Book of Knowledge represents, is underpinned by the imagination. And so I'm so glad that we got to exercise our imaginations, both by hearing Lisa Beach Hartz's fabulous poems and by making a stab at writing ourselves. So thank you again so much for joining us at this 44th Annual ODU Literary Festival, and thank you, Lisa, for joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting me.